Have you ever noticed that the smartest people you know rarely seem to be the happiest? That friends who think deeply about life often struggle with anxiety, overthinking, and existential dread? What if this isn't coincidental, but reflects a fundamental truth about human consciousness? What if your quest for knowledge and understanding, the very intelligence you've been taught to prize, is actually the source of your deepest suffering? German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer proposed exactly this radical idea over 200 years ago, yet his insights remain disturbingly relevant today. In a world obsessed with intelligence, where we optimize brain performance, chase higher education, and worship genius, Schopenhauer offers a provocative counterpoint that challenges everything we believe about knowledge and happiness. Imagine for a moment you're watching two people at a party. One is intellectually brilliant, analyzing the political implications of every conversation, contemplating the philosophical underpinnings of casual remarks, seeing patterns and connections others miss. The other is simpler, focused on the taste of the food, laughing easily at jokes, present in each moment without dissecting it. Which person do you think experiences more joy? Schopenhauer would argue it's almost certainly the latter. But why? According to Schopenhauer, intelligence acts like a magnifying glass for suffering. The more perceptive your mind, the more clearly you see life's inherent contradictions, absurdities, and inevitable disappointments. While others might live contentedly within comforting illusions, believing their achievements will last, their relationships will fulfill them, or their pursuits have inherent meaning, the intelligent mind cuts through these protective fictions and glimpses the harsh reality beneath. Consider your own experience. Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, mind racing through scenarios and possibilities while less contemplative friends sleep peacefully? Have you noticed how children, with their limited understanding, find wonder in experiences that adults find mundane? The pattern is clear. As awareness expands, so too does the capacity for suffering. This happens because intelligence doesn't just increase your understanding, it fundamentally changes your relationship with desire. Schopenhauer believed all life is driven by what he called the will, a blind, insatiable striving that never reaches lasting satisfaction. We want things, work to get them, briefly feel content, then immediately begin wanting something else. It's an endless cycle that keeps us perpetually striving, but never truly fulfilled. While everyone experiences this cycle, the intelligent person sees it happening in real time. They recognize the futility even as they participate. Imagine wanting a promotion, working tirelessly to achieve it, then, almost immediately after success, feeling the satisfaction evaporate as new desires arise. The average person might chase the next goal, hoping the next achievement will finally bring lasting happiness. But the more perceptive mind recognizes the pattern, understanding that no achievement ever will. This awareness creates a peculiar kind of suffering, a meta-suffering that comes from seeing the machinery of your own discontent. The intelligent person experiences not just disappointment, but disappointment about being disappointed. They know their desires are ultimately unsatisfiable, but cannot help desiring anyway. It's like being trapped in a game you know is rigged, but must continue playing. Intelligence also intensifies suffering through isolation. When you see through social conventions, cultural myths, and comforting delusions that connect most people, you often find yourself standing apart, unable to fully participate in the shared illusions that make social bonds possible. Have you ever found yourself at a gathering, watching others enthusiastically discuss something you see as fundamentally meaningless? That sense of alienation, of being surrounded by people yet fundamentally alone, is the isolation Schopenhauer described. The philosopher observed this pattern in the lives of exceptional thinkers throughout history. Consider how many brilliant minds struggled with depression, social isolation, and existential despair. From Hemingway to Woolf, Newton to Nietzsche, Tesla to Turing. Their extraordinary perception often came with extraordinary pain. Their intelligence didn't protect them from suffering, it deepened it. Look at the lives of renowned geniuses throughout history. Vincent van Gogh's brilliant artistic vision was accompanied by debilitating mental anguish. Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the 20th century's most influential philosophers, battled severe depression throughout his life. John Nash, the Nobel Prize-winning mathematician, fought a lifelong struggle with schizophrenia. These aren't mere coincidences, but manifestations of what Schopenhauer identified: the price of seeing too clearly, feeling too deeply, and understanding too much. This relationship between intelligence and suffering isn't limited to anecdotal evidence. Modern psychological research increasingly confirms Schopenhauer's intuitions. Studies have found correlations between high IQ and increased rates of affective disorders, anxiety, and social difficulties. One study from Pitzer College found that people with higher IQs were more likely to worry excessively and ruminate on problems. Another, from the London School of Economics, showed that individuals with higher intelligence reported higher levels of psychological distress. The mechanisms behind this connection are multifaceted. Highly intelligent people tend to process information more deeply, which can lead to overthinking and difficulty turning off the analytical mind. They often notice subtle problems and inconsistencies others miss, creating more opportunities for concern. They frequently engage in counterfactual thinking, imagining alternative scenarios and outcomes, which can fuel regret, anxiety, and perfectionism. Intelligence enables pattern recognition across vast domains of knowledge, making global and existential threats more salient and personal. But Schopenhauer wasn't merely pointing out a problem without offering solutions. His philosophy contains profound insights about finding peace despite the burden of awareness. Unlike modern self-help gurus who offer techniques to optimize happiness, Schopenhauer proposed something far more radical: transcending the cycle of desire altogether. His approach draws surprisingly from Eastern traditions, particularly Buddhism. Decades before Eastern philosophy became widely known in Europe, Schopenhauer recognized parallels between his own insights and Buddhist teachings about desire as the root of suffering. Both traditions suggest that liberation comes not from satisfying our endless wants, but from understanding and quieting them. How does this work in practice? Schopenhauer suggested several paths that intelligent minds might follow to find peace despite their awareness. The first is through aesthetic experiences, particularly music. When fully absorbed in great art, the mind temporarily stops its restless scheming and desiring. It steps outside the endless cycle of want and momentarily experiences freedom from the will. Have you ever been so moved by music that you forgot yourself entirely? That momentary liberation is what Schopenhauer had in mind. Music held special significance for Schopenhauer because, unlike other art forms that represent ideas or objects, music directly expresses the will itself. It speaks directly to our emotional core, bypassing the intellectual filters that often separate us from direct experience. Through music, we don't merely think about emotions, we feel them directly, achieving a rare moment of unmediated experience that transcends the analytical mind. The power of aesthetic experience explains why highly intelligent people often develop deep connections to art. It provides temporary relief from the relentless activity of their minds. Consider Albert Einstein, who found solace playing violin when mathematical problems became overwhelming. Or John Stuart Mill, who emerged from severe depression partly through rediscovering poetry. These weren't mere distractions, but doorways to a different mode of being, one where the analytical mind takes a back seat to direct experience. A second path lies in contemplative detachment, learning to observe your desires without being controlled by them. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying wants, but rather developing the capacity to watch them arise and pass without automatically acting on them. It's similar to what modern mindfulness teaches, creating a space between stimulus and response where freedom becomes possible. Schopenhauer described this as quieting the will, a state where we temporarily step outside the endless cycle of wanting and striving to become pure observers of existence. In this state, we experience a rare kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances or achievements. It comes from transcending the very mechanism that creates suffering in the first place, our identification with desires. This contemplative path involves recognizing that you are not your thoughts or desires, but the awareness in which they appear. With practice, even the most intelligent mind can learn to observe its own machinations without being caught up in them. This creates a profound shift in perspective, from being driven by the will to witnessing it with compassionate detachment. Perhaps most crucially, Schopenhauer emphasized compassion as an antidote to intelligence-induced suffering. When you truly recognize that all beings are driven by the same will, experiencing the same fundamental struggles you face, it breaks through the isolation of intelligence. Seeing others not as objects or obstacles, but as fellow travelers caught in the same difficult journey, creates genuine connection despite the alienating effects of awareness. Compassion offers a way to transform the alienation of intelligence into a deeper form of connection. The very perceptiveness that reveals life's absurdities also allows you to see the universal nature of suffering. Everyone, regardless of intellectual capacity, experiences desire, fear, loss, and confusion. Everyone seeks happiness while avoiding pain. Recognizing this shared condition creates the possibility for authentic connection that transcends intellectual divisions. This compassionate recognition leads to Schopenhauer's most radical idea, that true peace comes through a kind of selflessness where individual desires matter less than our connection to the whole. By loosening our white-knuckle grip on personal wants and identities, we can experience moments of profound tranquility that intelligent overthinking usually prevents. What's fascinating is how modern neuroscience has begun confirming aspects of Schopenhauer's intuitions. Research shows that overthinking, rumination, correlates strongly with unhappiness and anxiety disorders. Studies of highly intelligent individuals reveal higher rates of mood disorders, sleep problems, and social difficulties. The brain regions associated with self-reflection and analysis are often overactive in depression. What Schopenhauer grasped through observation and philosophy, science is now measuring in brain activity and psychological outcomes. Neuroimaging studies have identified a brain network called the default mode network, DMN, that activates when we're not focused on external tasks. This network is associated with self-referential thinking, mind-wandering, and rumination. Research shows that the DMN is more active and more strongly connected in highly intelligent individuals, potentially explaining their tendency toward overthinking. Intriguingly, practices that Schopenhauer recommended, like aesthetic absorption and mindful detachment, have been shown to temporarily deactivate the DMN, providing relief from the endless self-referential thinking that often accompanies intelligence. But does this mean we should reject intelligence or stop seeking knowledge? Absolutely not. Schopenhauer himself was a voracious intellect who valued understanding deeply. The key distinction lies in how we use our intelligence, whether it becomes a trap of endless analysis or a tool for genuine wisdom. Wisdom, unlike mere intelligence, involves knowing what questions to stop asking. It recognizes when thinking becomes circular and unproductive. Wisdom understands the limits of rationality and makes peace with mystery. Perhaps most importantly, wisdom knows when to set aside the analyzing mind and simply experience life directly. Consider the difference between someone who intellectually analyzes a piece of music, breaking down its structure, comparing it to historical precedents, judging its merits, versus someone who simply allows themselves to be moved by it. Both approaches involve intelligence, but the latter contains wisdom, the former lacks. The wise person knows when to think and when to simply be. This distinction points to a practical approach for intelligent people seeking peace. Rather than trying to think your way out of overthinking, an impossible task, learn to recognize when your brilliant mind has become a hamster wheel of suffering. Develop the capacity to step outside analytical thought and into direct experience. Practice being present with sensations, emotions, and relationships without immediately dissecting them. The ultimate paradox Schopenhauer offers is this: the highest use of intelligence might be recognizing its own limitations. The truly brilliant mind understands when to set brilliance aside. Like a sharp knife, intelligence is an invaluable tool when needed, but you wouldn't use it constantly for every task, nor would you absent-mindedly turn it against yourself. Modern life intensifies the intelligence trap Schopenhauer identified. We're bombarded with information, drowning in complexity, and living in cultures that often confuse intellectual processing with wisdom. We analyze our happiness, optimize our lifestyles, and transform even leisure into projects requiring mental effort. Meanwhile, rates of anxiety, depression, and existential distress soar despite unprecedented access to knowledge. The information age has created what we might call the paradox of awareness. The more we know, the more we realize how much there is to worry about. From climate change to political polarization, economic inequality to existential risks, the intelligent mind has an almost infinite supply of legitimate concerns to fixate on. The internet ensures we're constantly exposed to problems we can understand but cannot personally solve, a recipe for the peculiar helplessness Schopenhauer identified centuries ago. Perhaps we're collectively experiencing what Schopenhauer observed in individuals, that knowing more doesn't automatically mean suffering less. That in fact, for many of us, it means suffering more acutely, more consciously, with fewer protective illusions to soften life's harder edges. So, what's the path forward? Schopenhauer suggests a form of intelligent surrender, not abandoning thought, but developing the wisdom to know when thinking no longer serves us. It means periodically setting aside the endless internal commentary to simply experience life directly. It means recognizing when desires are running the show and gently disidentifying from them without suppression or denial. The practical applications are surprisingly straightforward. Cultivate practices that temporarily quiet the analytical mind, whether through art, nature, meditation, or simply fully engaging in activities that absorb you completely. Develop compassion that transcends intellectual understanding, not just knowing others suffer, but truly feeling connected to their experience. Learn to notice when your intelligence becomes a hamster wheel rather than a pathway forward. Most importantly, consider whether your pursuit of knowledge and understanding always serves your well-being. Are there questions better left unexplored? Areas where analysis diminishes rather than enhances your experience? Moments when setting aside your brilliant mind might allow for deeper connection, joy, or peace. Schopenhauer's insights invite us to develop a more nuanced relationship with our own intelligence, to value its gifts while remaining aware of its pitfalls. Instead of being dominated by the analyzing mind, we can learn to use it as a tool, picking it up when useful and setting it down when it becomes a burden. This balanced approach doesn't reject intelligence, but places it within a larger context of human flourishing. The irony Schopenhauer offers is profound. Sometimes the most intelligent choice is to stop trying to be so intelligent, to allow yourself moments of simple, unanalyzed existence where the burden of knowing is temporarily set aside. This isn't ignorance, but wisdom of the highest order, the recognition that our brilliant minds, for all their extraordinary capacities, cannot think their way to peace. In our knowledge-obsessed culture, where intellectual prowess is celebrated above almost all else, Schopenhauer's message feels almost heretical. Yet for those caught in cycles of overthinking, existential dread, and intelligence-induced suffering, it offers a radical but deeply freeing possibility. Perhaps the path to peace isn't knowing more, but knowing when to set knowledge aside and simply be. The question isn't whether to value intelligence, it's whether intelligence alone can deliver what we truly seek. Schopenhauer's answer echoes across 2 centuries. The highest wisdom may not be in accumulating more knowledge, but in recognizing when knowledge itself has become the barrier to what we most deeply need. In that recognition lies the possibility of peace that even the most brilliant mind, left to its own devices, might never find. Subscribe for more deep dives into psychological concepts that illuminate the human experience. New videos on depth psychology every week.